All right. So, what can we learn from a real life SERE story? And for those of you who don't know, SERE stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. Right? And to this, we're looking at the story of Captain Scott O'Grady. There's a cover of his book, one that he wrote from his experience basically after he was shot down over Bosnia in the 90s. Right? So, who is Captain Scott O'Grady. He is a former Air Force F-16 pilot. He was shot down over Bosnia on June 2nd, 1995. He was basically evaded for 6 days till he was rescued. A cool fact about him is he was actually nominated for Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs by Trump in November 2020. But nomination was returned after some of his personal actions that he did. Mostly, forget exactly what he did to turn it over. Basically, I'm not gonna go too much into that. He did some stuff. It was returned. Not like bad. It was just kind of he was vocal about viewpoints during what happened in 2020. Anyways, also another thing to note is why are titles so long like that? Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. I mean, yeah. Anyways, why is it important to read and learn from this kind of stuff? Hopefully you never actually have to use the stuff you learn, but if you do, it's a lifesaver, quite literally. There's that. There's also just things you learn in the actual SERE classes too. If you do those, if you go into the military, you learn a lot very quickly. That's the point. Anyways, one thing that kind of he accentuated in the book, and then I'll get into more of what exactly happened to him. He showed that we all need a reason for what we do, and at some level, it's just necessary. People need a purpose to thrive, no matter what the situation is, and kind of some way to measure their life, right? So, to take a quote about this book specifically, it's called A True Life Thriller of One Man's Fierce Struggle to Survive in a Hostile Territory of War-Torn Bosnia, told in his own words. He is very big on the code of conduct, which is what it's for, especially for situations like that. It's even printed in the front. This book itself is only about 206 pages. It's not that long, but still. And they have photos in it as well, right? And it alternates between kind of his story of his evasion and his story of just the Air Force in general. Just goes back and forth. Excuse me. So basically what was going on was he was in Aviano Air Base in Italy, and they were there with NATO to enforce a NATO no-fly zone in the skies over Bosnia. Eventually, on June 2nd, 1995, he was shot down by a Soviet anti-aircraft missile, some form of SAM, and then survived 6 days and nights with Bosnian Serbs hunting him down. And basically with the book, he explains his thoughts pretty much every single day. I guess it's kind of I don't want to say it's a nice thing, but it's a perk of it being so short, in that you can get you can get more of the story, because it is a shorter evasion, if that makes sense. It's easier to go day by day, and he can give you almost not hourly, but it in 200 pages, you don't really have to condense it to give the whole story, right? And he explains everything that happened to him after his rescue as well, including a family dinner with the Clintons at the White House. And at the end, I'll go a little bit more into the story. But yeah, basically, part of the reason that I thought this book was the thing that I liked about this book the most was probably how in depth with his own thought processes that he was in. So like whenever he was shot down, he talked about like what was going through his head after he went through the ceiling or the canopy, and then on his way down, and how he had that momentary like distrust of his equipment and pulled the manual stuff on his parachute first before letting it actually fall down to, I think it's 14,000 feet, is when it'll go out on its own, or should go out on its own. And he pulled somewhere in the 20s, I believe, which just allows for a longer fall, but that's easier to track for enemies on the ground and that sort of thing. Things like that, whenever he hit the ground, I guess one perk was, since he took so long to get to the ground relatively, he had time to kind of make a plan beforehand, and then he just booked it into the woods for the most part, avoiding the road so he'd be harder to track and things like that. Power lines are not your friend, that's for damn sure. But pretty much only moved around at night. He talked about a lot of like the fear aspect of it. He had a few inns with some cows that he eventually named. Basically, they always like to come over to where he was hiding, and they'd eat the grass right in front of him until the rancher, if they call them ranches over there, would come over and, you know, make sure his cows were all right, because they just run off on their own to this desolate corner in the field. Talked a lot about the being hunted, that's for sure. And it was a lot of kind of back and forth. He talked a lot about the problems with the C-cell radio he was having and things like that. How he was feeling a lot of the times was a big thing. That's one thing that I noticed, not just in the book, but I guess like personal experience going through SERE, is you remember much more of like kind of the raw feelings than anything else. So that was, I thought that was really portrayed in this book, especially in retrospect. Yeah, let's see if I can stop saying the word for one. But finally, he went to, after his dinner with the Clintons, basically he went to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And with that, the quote that he finishes the book off with is, "But the tomb stood for what lasted. It wasn't the reward that mattered or the recognition you might harvest. It was your depth of commitment, your quality of service, the product of your devotion. These were the things that counted in life. When you gave purely, I thought," being him, "the honor came in the giving, and that was honor enough," right? And it's kind of the point. So, like with the title of the book, "Return with Honor," that's also that's a saying used a lot. You see it a lot of the times in SERE. That's part of like the actual seal in the patch. I remember it being a huge thing in the gym there on the campus, where it's all off on its own in the middle of nowhere, as you would expect. But in the gym, it's, you know, the eagle with the barbed wire and the "Return with Honor" is like a seal, or not a seal, but like a crest above it. It's been a while. I have to find a patch, but anyways, I don't want to go too far in depth, just because, I mean, it's his story and it's not that long of a book. I'm sure you can find other things about it too, to where you don't have to get a book, but regardless, it's definitely a story worth reading or just hearing in general. If you want me to specifically go more in depth, tell me so in the comments, I guess, because if someone wants me to actually like go in depth with it a bit more, then I don't think I have a problem with it. But anyways, I'm going to leave this one here. As always, playlist for all the books and stuff up in the corner. So, like I said, I'm going to leave this one here, and I hope to see you guys on the next one.